our today's webinar, is ChatGPT going to replace systematic review tools? My name is Claudia Keppa, and I'm a community manager at Evidence Prime. And this is one of our most requested webinars, and we would like to thank you all for finding time and joining us today here. So I would like to also share some news with you. We have created Security Corner in our website of Evidence Prime, as we want to provide our clients with the best quality service. If you would like to know more about all our certifications we received, you can find the link in the chat or follow the link which is here on the slide. And also today, Pavel will tell us more about the topic. Last week, Evidence Prime has received main prize for the best technological solution in the Eagle of Innovation competition, which is organized by Rzeczpospolita Daily in Poland. We also have a little article about it, what it means for us, and how grateful we are for receiving this prize on our website, and we will provide you with the link in the chat. Last month, also, Artur Nowak, our CTO, was present at the eSport conference in Boston, and he presented a poster there, which you can also find on the website of Laser AI, which the link is also provided in the chat. So you can read our summary from the participation in that event. And last but not least, we have AI in evidence-based healthcare group on LinkedIn. We invite you to join the discussion where machine learning experts explain new relevant papers without technical jargon, and where we share new research in evidence synthesis methods. If you have any research or interesting findings on the topic, please feel free to join and share it with us as well. So to get to know all of you, I would like to ask you a few questions about your background. So I think you can see them on the screen right now. The first question is, which of the following best describes the place where you work? Academia, government or regulatory body, non-government organization, consulting, pharmaceutical company, medical devices company, or other? I can see that people already answer. The second question, are you involved in your daily activities with literature reviews? Yes, I'm frequently involved. Yes, I'm occasionally involved. Or no, I'm not involved. And the third question is for the ones who answered yes on the second question. Which best describes your involvement with literature reviews? I conduct systematic reviews. I supervise systematic reviews. I outsource systematic reviews to third parties, for example, to consulting firm. I am involved with systematic reviews in a managerial capacity, such as budgeting, hiring, training. I consume outcomes of systematic reviews. For example, I develop economic models, and I am involved with other types of literature reviews, but not with systematic reviews. And I see that people are still answering, so I will wait just a little bit. Before I share the results. Okay. Almost everybody already answered. So let me finish the poll and show you results. We welcome a lot of people from academia and from government or regulatory bodies, non-government organizations. And most of you is involved in literature reviews. And most of you also conduct systematic reviews. So welcome everybody, and we hope that you will enjoy all our presentations today. So our agenda for today, first we will tell you how safe is your data, and we will give updates on security and the SOC 2 certification. And second, is GPT-4 the only model we need? Why alternative approaches should be used in evidence synthesis? And our first speaker is Paweł Kunstman. He's a co-founder and president of Evidence Prime, and he focuses on enterprise security and AI features of our software and manages the company operations. He will tell us more about how Laser AI keeps your data safe. And second speaker, Artur Nowak, co-founder and CTO of Evidence Prime. He helps the brightest minds answer the most challenging questions in healthcare through his work in artificial intelligence. And he will tell us more about language models and ChatGPT. So thank you, and I give the floor to you, Paweł.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. I hope you can hear me. Can you? It's all right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. So I have a pleasure to have a kind of a warm-up talk. It will take just up to 10 minutes before the main event takes place with Artur. So I would like to tell you a little bit about the safety of your data in Laser AI and GradePro and our security certifications that we recently received. We try to give this security updates every couple of months because we think security of the data and is one of the paramount aspects of our service. So that's why we think it's worthwhile to spend a little time on it from time to time. So let's go on with that. So first, the security news. So we have like three topics to cover. First are the certifications that we received since the last update, and we acquired the ISO 27001 certification in March this year. We acquired SOC 2 Type 2 certification in April. And the other topic is the transparency. First of all, we implemented a compliance solution called the SCRAT automation, which helps us serve you in a secure way and make sure that we can pass all the security audits without problems. And which is related to that, we enabled the Evidence Prime Trust Center, which is available at trust.evidenceprime.com. And everyone can go there and look at that. I will speak a few words about it in a moment. And the third and the last topic is the single sign-on functionality, which we enabled in the last version of Laser AI, which is called Hydrogen, just released. So let's get to the topic. So first of all, our certifications. Right now we have three certifications: the FedRAMP, which we acquired for Laser AI a year ago. And the two new certificates, which is ISO 27001 for Laser AI and GradePro Enterprise Secure Edition, acquired in March, and SOC 2 Type 2 certificate for the same group of products, so Laser AI and GradePro Enterprise Secure Edition, which we acquired a month ago. And for those of you who do not know the difference between FedRAMP and SOC 2 and ISO, there are quite a lot of differences between them. So first of all, FedRAMP is not only a compliance framework as ISO and SOC 2 are. The compliance frameworks really verify whether the organization as ours complies with the rules of the security that they adopt. The authorization program, on the other hand, is something which allows also, or primarily, the given service to be purchased by someone. So FedRAMP is both a compliance framework and the authorization program. It authorizes the US governmental bodies, so agencies, to purchase, in our case, Laser AI. So because we have this certification, they can just buy it without much hassle. And that's why it serves both purposes. So FedRAMP's assessment is focused on the security of the data within the system, and also on the implemented measures against anything that can compromise the security of that data. So in contrast to that, ISO and SOC 2 generally focus on how a vendor handles the security. So what are the processes that they implemented to assure this security? And the audit validates whether the organization, as ours, follows their policies and procedures. So in a way, we can say that the FedRAMP's security main focus is the technology of how the security is implemented, while for ISO and for SOC, the main focus are the processes that the company implemented. So, in fact, to serve the customers in a secure way, we have to do both, and those certificates, in a way, go together and work together the best to assure you that both the technological part and the process part is done correctly, and it was validated by external bodies. The second topic, as I said, is the transparency. So for that, we partnered with Scrat.io, which is a company, a technology, to validate the security posture of a given service provider. So they validate the security posture of Evidence Prime, of our processes, as well as our tools, which we provide to our users, so Laser AI and GreatPro Enterprise. And in addition to that, they do a couple of other important topics, for example, the staff training, and they help gathering the evidence for audits, as well as for the Trust Center. That's why we could quite easily provide like a transparent view of how and what we implemented in order to make sure that your data is safe with us. And it's available for everyone at trust.evidenceprime.com. And also it provides much more detailed views with source data and reports and audit reports. And these details are available to interested parties, but they require signing an NDA. And we provide that for those parties that are interested in purchasing or partnering with us. And they require this type of deep, also internal information. But we are happy to share it whenever it's required. And in addition to that, also available to everyone is the subprocessor page, which is available at the trust.evidenceprime.com. And this page lists all the cloud infrastructure as a service and platform as a service providers that we, so internally in our office or our tools like Laser AI and GreatPro, use in order to serve you the services. So we list there every cloud provider, every system that might have access to either the data of our customers, or to our data which we use in the office, which also is quite important to know who processes what and why. So this information is available on trust.evidenceprime.com. And the last topic before I give floor to Artur is the single sign-on functionality. So SSO, as it is called, is now available in Laser from this new recent version, which we called Hydrogen. SSO was available for GreatPro for some time already, but not for Laser. And the SSO allows integration with organization or corporate security systems. So if you, for example, log into your organization systems using Microsoft or Azure or IBM, Oracle, SAP, and many others, we can just integrate with these providers, and you can use the same credentials to log into Laser AI. We also allow integration with leaner technologies like Active Directory, Google Workspace, OAuth, which also makes possible to use the social media logins if required. That's also possible. The question is why it is important. So SSO is really a compliance requirement, and most mature organizations and corporations, especially perhaps corporations, just require the cloud providers to support it, because it enables them to manage the users and the credentials themselves, not via our own tools. So SSO is the place where the administrators can set the access rights, that they can reduce insecure practices, for example, require strong passwords, ensure that the policies like multi-factor authentications are in place. They can monitor who accesses what and when, and if required, they can cut off the access to the compromised accounts or the accounts of the people who left the company. So, so this is something that was up to now not available, but it is. So if your organization needs it, welcome to Laser AI. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much. And now that was the warm-up talk. And now for the main event, I would like to give the floor to Claudia and Artur. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pavel. Thank you for explaining. For now, we do not have any questions related to the topic, but please feel free to ask in the question and answer session. I will say again that yes, the video recording will be sent to all the participants and all the registered ones after the webinar, and we will provide the necessary materials. And yeah, Artur, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all of you for joining us today. And the topic is, can ChatGPT replace systematic review tools? So the first thing that I'm going to address is whether ChatGPT can replace systematic reviews, period. And we can say that maybe it's a little bit controversial, but when you actually look at academic Twitter and across many pages from university libraries, you can repeatedly see that the librarians are now asked by students and faculty to retrieve citations that don't exist. And all these citations are really coming from so-called hallucinations from ChatGPT and other tools. And the extent to which this happens is, I think, best exemplified by the number of these self-help pages that you can see. So here is an example from University of Waterloo, where they explicitly share some examples of how ChatGPT can make references up. And even if asked about them, that it can provide all the metadata, including ISBN or even DOI numbers. So this means that certainly this is a trend now for people to go to ChatGPT for their academic research and trying to do literature reviews through this means. So this is not only specific to academia and systematic reviews in general. So last week, a very interesting legal case was publicized where the lawyer used ChatGPT to find some cases that he can use in his argument. The problem is, again, these cases were, let's say, fabricated by ChatGPT. And ChatGPT was even happy to provide all the details how to locate these cases. Unfortunately, the lawyer here didn't really go to the great length of verifying these claims, and you can probably expect that the judge was not happy about this. So this is one example from another field that shows that kind of trusting ChatGPT with your review can get you into serious trouble. So this is the problem with the current generation of these systems. But of course, there is an ongoing research how to filter these hallucinations, how to stop the systems from doing this in the first place. So we can safely assume that very soon this problem will be fixed. So what then? Well, do you think that then we can just go and instead of doing systematic reviews, we can go to ChatGPT and ask it to provide summary of the best available evidence on a given topic? So for me personally, this is not an option, because what makes the systematic reviews systematic is also the fact that they are explicit in their methodology and that they can be easily reproduced. And switching to a system like ChatGPT really means that we are using something which is closed and opaque in terms of how it's being developed and how it works internally. And really, the situation reminds me of something that I think was a very active area of research 10 years ago, where systematic reviewers began to recognize the unprecedented coverage of Google Scholar. So Google Scholar is, beyond any doubt, the most comprehensive literature database. So some people ask the question whether we can just use Google Scholar instead of going to PubMed and doing searches in multiple sources. So other people opposed. They said Google Scholar is not enough to be used alone. And also recently, we have a very good study that compares 26 different literature resources. And this research highlights something that I think is really crucial, that Google Scholar cannot be used as the primary source for literature in literature reviews. And one of the reasons is that it gives you only 1,000 results, but also that it's not repeatable, both in terms of time and also location. So it means that the same query can give you different results depending on where you are currently located. And this is something that is very similar to what you can see as the fine print in ChatGPT interface, that ChatGPT is basically a slightly new, slightly revised system every month. And of course, most of these changes make this system stronger. OpenAI for sure uses all the feedback from millions of users of ChatGPT to refine this software. But sometimes it also means that they may do some performance improvements that may lead to degradation of the accuracy of this system. So again, we are not really able to potentially reproduce the results that we get from ChatGPT 1 year from now, which in my view at least, makes it impossible to use it directly to do systematic reviews. So I think that what it really underlines is that we need to understand the limits of the tools. And here I'm highlighting a phrase from this paper that compared 26 different literature databases, that we need to really pick the good tool for the job. And some things that we need to consider in terms of ChatGPT limitations are that ChatGPT only knows about what happened until September 2021. Nobody knows what ChatGPT knows and doesn't know, because the training data for this system, and especially for the GPT-4, which is now, let's say, we have very little insight into how it was trained. This training data is so vast that we cannot really reliably check what's in there. And this is, by the way, one of the problems with evaluating this data with these systems, because we don't really know on what they were trained on. And this is really a hypothesis. We don't know this for sure, but based on how these systems are trained, we can expect that they are picking the most dominant narratives. In other way, they are trained in such a way to really pick the strongest signal. So if we do a literature review, we are really interested in capturing every study, every view on the subject, and this may be simply incompatible with how the system is trained. Okay, so my point here, and let me know in the questions whether you agree or disagree, is that systematic review process is here to stay. So we'll continue to follow the process that we have right now to cast the net wide, that duplicate, screen, and extract or abstract data from references. And because this process is here to stay, the systematic review tools are also needed and will be needed in the future. However, what can happen is that within the same process, we may see increased automation of many of these steps. So we may have AI agents that are performing these steps on a level of automation that is not possible currently. So in other words, in maybe not so distant future, I don't really believe that we will go to AI and ask it to, write a manuscript of a systematic review on topic X. I rather expect that we'll ask AI to use a tool or use a tool that has AI integrated. And this way, it's more like asking my colleagues to do a systematic review and show me all the results, instead of just asking them to submit the final conclusion. Because this way, I can see what went into their process. I can potentially correct something or make some adjustments. And also it makes this whole process easier to reproduce. So this is exactly what we are doing in Laser AI. We are using the same user interface, of course, with many improvements and adjustments, but we are integrating large language models, also including GPT, to populate data extraction forms so you can really work within the tool. You don't need to change your process. You can follow the same process, but you can get much better automation. So some of you may ask, can't we just use ChatGPT plugins? So now ChatGPT has this wonderful capability of also accessing external tools. And one of these tools is called Ask Your PDF, which means that you can upload a PDF to some service and then perform question and answering based on it using ChatGPT, also including its most powerful model, which is GPT-4. So this works really well. I mean, it's really eye-opening how great this AI system is. Of course, you need to do some prompt engineering, which means asking your questions in a certain way to get the results that you want. So for instance, here, this answer is really great, but maybe I'm really interested in having something shorter. So I need to ask the question in a very specific way. And this is not my first approach at this question. I had to try a couple of different versions until I got to something that gives me just the result without any additional details. So this means that the capability is there. You need to tame it a little bit. You need to ask the questions in a sensible way, and also so you are understood, and also in such a way that you get the result that you want. But of course, it's really eye-opening how what progress we are seeing with GPT-4. And also, what I wanted to highlight here is you probably cannot be satisfied with the prompt that I have on my screen right now. You would also be interested in providing some more details, what you mean by these different study designs, just to be sure that this reflects how you want this tool to work. And now the problem is that more detail you provide and more questions you ask to really simulate the whole data extraction process, the more it costs you. ChatGPT with GPT-4 currently has a limit of 25 messages every 3 hours, but you can use API. But API pretty much removes this limitation on how many studies you can process within 3 hours, but at the same time, it will cost you really a lot of money if you want to provide more detail in the prompt. So the question is, maybe there is somebody who is, first of all, already writing these prompts and thinking about what models to use, so it's more economical, and also has some sort of a user interface, so you don't need to copy and paste information from ChatGPT to your data extraction form. Even better, maybe this tool also has an interface that highlights where this data is coming from in the PDF, so we can also verify that ChatGPT is not making things up. And this is exactly what Laser is. So if you are looking at something that has validated accuracy of the models, our team is doing exactly this. If you're interested in something that has the best models for the job, if you are concerned about the carbon footprint of running such huge models like GPT-4, we also got you covered, because we work on smaller models, some of them open source, to make sure that we are not really using track to just pick one apple from the convenience store around the corner, that we really pick the best tool for the job. And on top of this, we can run these models across thousands of references, which is required in screening. And we have user interface built around the interaction with AI. So in the rest of my talk, I would also like to explain a little bit what exactly it means to look at these smaller models and whether it's realistic for a team like ours to match this unprecedented accuracy of GPT-4. So just to get everybody on the same page, GPT-4 is the latest generation of large language models from OpenAI, and it's currently considered to be the state of the art. Here you can see a table coming from the technical report and that highlights the progress in terms of how these models fare in closed book exams in different fields. So you can see that the improvement from GPT 3.5, which was the, let's say, previous state of the art, is really remarkable. And now these tools are able to solve tests much better than most of the humans. And here again, these are closed book exams. So it means that these models are just answering based on the knowledge they accumulated during the pre-training. They are not doing this sort of, let's say, reasoning that we look for in systematic reviews. It's more like just answering from what you already know. So researchers from Microsoft that had access to GPT-4 before its release published a paper called that they titled "Sparks of Artificial General Intelligence," which is really a very strong claim that GPT-4 is already expecting something that the field considers the holy grail, being able to perform pretty much any task. So this paper is 155 pages long, so we will not go through it, but I think that what is really interesting is looking at examples for which GPT-4 is not working at the moment, just to kind of get the sense of tools limitations. So GPT-4 is currently not able to perform such arithmetic operations if even we have single-digit numbers, but there is like a sequence of them. They are also not able to write a poem that starts and ends with the same line, with the difference being that the last line is in reverse. And why is that? I mean, why such powerful model that is able to do a lot of reasoning and a lot of poetry writing is not able to follow these tasks? So let's have a look at the evolutionary tree of large language models. And from this tree, you can see that GPT is not really the only I would say, sapient being here in this family. We also have so-called encoder-decoder models that are here in green. And this, let's say, nomenclature is a little bit misleading because basically all these models have encoders and decoders. Otherwise, they would not be able to process text and output text. But let's say that really the main differentiator is that GPT is trained all to just predict the next token in text, while we have these so-called encoders, decoders that are also trained to fill gaps, and on top of also predicting the next token. So you can say that to a large degree, we have two families of models, and I think it's interesting to see how these models kind of differ in terms of their capabilities. So if you look at the best results on so-called abstractive text summarization, which is producing a summary which is not taking snippets of text, but rather producing some sort of a interesting new text that summarizes another piece of text, pretty much all these models are encoders, decoders. You don't have any GPT-free or any GPT-like models. On the other hand, if you look at question answering, especially the closed book question answering, only GPT-like models here. So this really highlights, I think, something that maybe not getting to the public and is just something that is known in the research field, that there are more model architectures than just GPT. And of course, so-called auto-regressive decoders like GPT are best at generating text, and that they are best at holding a conversation and doing auto-completion. But there are also other tools that are really best at other tasks. And so here you can kind of do this little quiz with me. So which architecture do you think is more suitable for chat, so holding a casual conversation, versus assessing risk of bias? And I think that really, while the chat application is the best use for GPT, assessing risk of bias really benefits from having this bidirectional access to the text and being able to really reason not only across, let's say, the forward pass through the text, but looking across the whole text. And the other thing with GPT is that probably the most expensive part of training these models is so-called reinforcement learning from human feedback. And without getting into too much details in terms of technicalities, when you have human in some name, it means that somebody had to spend time doing this, and this means that it's expensive and probably difficult to reproduce. So this technique is mostly used to ensure model alignment, so that these models answer in some ways or don't answer for to some of the questions. But this technique is also very important because when you look at a system like GPT, they are really kind of working in one of three modes. So depending on what you ask from them, they can either create something, so they are in creative mode. They can do information retrieval, which is something like this closed book question answering. So you are just asking questions, or they can reason based on text. And this reinforcement learning based on human feedback is really crucial to make sure that information retrieval capabilities are working well. And these information retrieval capabilities are exactly the kind of use cases that we discussed in the very beginning, where we had students asking ChatGPT to provide some references, or we had this lawyer asking ChatGPT to provide legal cases. But this information retrieval is not really what we want to do. We want to do reasoning based on the text that we provide and only on the text that we provide. So this means that for OpenAI and for the whole field that builds general purpose assistants and chatbots, it's really crucial to do this alignment to make sure that in this information retrieval mode, the model is not making things up. But the fact is, we don't need it. I mean, we are only interested in getting these models to just reason based on text. So using something like GPT-4 with all the human effort and money that went into training this, we are not really using a lot of this effort. What I also wanted to highlight, and I think that this is also underlining what difficulties creators of these tools face, and we don't necessarily face, is that it's not really clear for the model in which mode it should work. Because if you ask a question like, write a story about COVID-19 pandemic in 2000, then clearly this is something that maybe is like a science fiction story. But if you ask the same question with just the year being different, you are probably more in the information retrieval mode. And now, if the model mixes these two modes and tries to be creative when you wanted it to be just retrieving information, or answering based on its internal knowledge when you wanted it to be creative, you get upset. But it's not really that the model is functioning incorrectly. It's more about not really getting the intent of these prompts and these questions. So I think that GPT-4 is capable of solving the tasks of evidence synthesis. So if we take GPT-4, place some user interface on top of this, like for instance ours, if we also meet the security and compliance requirements, for instance, I made sure to use an open access study in my experiments with GPT-4 because I have no idea where this data is being sent. So I would rather not risk sending some copyrighted material there. But if we just build some sort of a harness, some infrastructure around it, I think that GPT-4 is really able to change the game in terms of automation of systematic reviews. And this is why we are also working on this technology. It has excellent reasoning skills, very good at following instructions, long context window, which means it can process the whole academic paper at once. But at the same time, I don't think it's the best tool for the job. And this is why we internally work on many alternatives. And this is why we are working on models that can be used for simpler fields while using GPT-4 through Microsoft Azure, which is the compliant version of GPT-4 for most demanding tasks. So especially the carbon footprint and opaque model of development is something that will remain to be, I think, even worse in the future. And I think that this also justifies our efforts for finding better and simpler solutions. So just to summarize this part, I think that GPT-4 is really a great tool that shows us what is possible. It requires some harness that we build, and now we are kind of moving to optimize this with use of smaller models. Just to deliver what I already had on, in my slides, but just to repeat it, something that is fine-tuned to this specific workflow, something that is secure and compliant, and so you don't need really to worry about this tool working or not. So we can do this work for you. Thank you, and we would be very happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Artur. That was really interesting presentation. And we already have some questions in the Q&A section, and I invite everybody to ask questions. So at the beginning of your presentation, somebody said that you provided old news and New Scholar AI plugin and browser integration can be used. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that Scholar AI is one of many plugins, I guess, and certainly we cannot keep track of everything. I'm not really familiar with this one, but I believe that Scholar AI is probably very close to what I presented as Ask Your PDF. It's probably following a very similar workflow. But if you can share more details, I think everybody will be very interested.
Yes, thank you. Next question. What about using ChatGPT for something more straightforward, like data extraction from published studies?
Yeah, so this is exactly what I also tried to cover in this Ask Your PDF demo. I can say that, based on our evaluations, it works really well, mostly if you use the GPT-4 model, and especially that this is currently the only one that can use plugins. At the same time, to really validate this across, let's say, many fields and many studies, this is research in progress. I don't believe that that anybody yet has, concrete numbers of how well it does. For this reason, we also think that having a user interface where you can see the predictions next to the PDF and you have link between the two are so helpful.
Right. Thank you. The next question is, one of the challenges when doing systematic review is including gray literature. Would ChatGPT be a good tool to use in addition to the other databases to identify additional studies that were not identified?
So I would risk saying that no, that it's not a good use case, mostly because here we can really kind of trigger this, let's say, hallucination or making things up mode. The other reason is that it's pretty difficult to say, okay, here is everything I know, give me another set of results. I may be wrong. We haven't done any research in this area, but based on what I know, I think that using other tools like searching across a larger number of indexed databases or Google Scholar is probably a better way to find gray literature.
Thank you. Another question from Pavel. So total automation of systematic reviews is impossible in your opinion in the future?
So I think it's possible, but my point here is that we can think about this total automation in two ways, and it's a little bit like I don't know if you're familiar with so-called mechanical Turks. So there was this chess players, automatic chess players in 19th century, but indeed there was somebody sitting inside of this machine and playing chess and moving pieces, but from the outside it looked like it's a real machine. So using this thought experiment, let's assume that we have this technology today, but really inside we have a team of people, and I would prefer this machine to give me detailed responses across all the stages of systematic review instead of just giving me the final manuscript. Regardless of the automation possibility and the timeline, I'm just saying that I believe that we'll still need to follow the process, and we need the responses from the automation to be at the same level of detail as we have currently from humans.
Okay, thank you. There is also a request to post the link to the search database paper that you were discussing. I think we'll provide all the links also with the follow-up email and perhaps the slides as well, if that's
Absolutely.
Okay. So then we have a big comment from Claudia. I would suggest that systematic reviews will be conducted in the same way in the future, but the use case for systematic reviews will become obsolete more and more. Imagine to create living guidelines with GAI, for example, during a pandemic. The evidence gathered might not be perfect, but the synthesis could be conducted within a day instead of within months. Practitioners might rather ask an LLM with a very specific review question instead of researching systematic reviews that only cover the question 70%.
Yeah, so hello, Claudia. And I agree that models like MedPalm, so the model from Google that was trained on massive number of studies and is really able to answer pretty much every question based on the research that it was trained on, is perhaps really covering most of the use cases for the clinicians. So at the same time, if we had a system that is able to conduct systematic reviews, maybe not in 1 second, but in 15 minutes, we could possibly create all the living systematic reviews that we need. Because if we kind of start with populations and then have living systematic reviews on all the interventions that we can conduct in a given population, and then update these living systematic reviews, then we could also say that all these systematic reviews are available on demand. So I think that this is really a bigger question about, again, research transparency, the assessment of quality of these studies. And in the long run, it's really beyond my comfort zone, because we also need to consider that the production of studies, production of evidence will be also automated. So we have robots that will do experiments and then create papers and publish them. So at some point, it's really difficult to say, but I'm not trying to predict the future longer than 3 years, to be honest.
Yes, there is a related question to that as well. What are your thoughts on authors use ChatGPT and other AI technologies as co-authors?
Yeah, an interesting question. And I need to say that I'm really interested what people think, because you know, in my understanding, this is still a tool. It's something that is not really a separate entity. You know, there is a very long legal process where one of the inventors wanted to include its AI tool as the co-inventor on a patent. And that was, you know, many times rejected by the court. So the question here is whether, as these systems become more capable, we will consider them as co-authors instead of just tools that draft something and then it needs kind of human input and validation. Or maybe we need to kind of need for these systems to really gain some sort of a, let's say, agency. It's again a difficult question, and to be honest, I'm not clear what to think here.
Maybe it's a topic to discover. We have a general question: what is the difference between GPT-4 and Laser AI?
So, so we can say that GPT-4 is a very large model. We don't really know how large it is, because it also marks, I think, quite unfortunate, let's say, moment in the history of the field where the labs are not publishing details of this work anymore. But we can also think that it has trillions of parameters. And this is a model that was developed by OpenAI and is available either through ChatGPT Plus or through API. Laser AI is a tool for systematic reviews that we produce at Evidence Prime, and we make use of different available models, also including GPT-4.
Thank you. There is a question if there is a free open version of Laser AI or only paid version, especially in non-funded research projects.
So unfortunately, currently not, also due to our, let's say, costs in running all these models. However, we are open to academic collaborations for projects done together. And then we are always happy to provide the tool free of charge. So please reach out to us, and we can see what is possible.
So I think that will also answer the question if it's possible to give a try of the platform for ongoing systematic reviews.
Absolutely. So please also reach out to us, and we'll be happy to talk.
Okay. Another question. If ChatGPT-4 or future versions are able to focus on specific known peer-reviewed data sets, will it be reliable enough to be a base of output for a systematic review?
Yeah, it's a great observation, and something that really makes me a little bit uneasy about GPT-4, because we don't really know what it was trained on, and we probably will not be able to find out. And in this information retrieval mode, in which we are just asking the model to provide its best guess on which references, let's say, are relevant to some PICO, we can try to validate what it answers, but nobody really knows what was there in the training set, and whether some studies are included there and some are not. The massive amount of this data means that it's really difficult to control it at this stage. You cannot just kind of verify, look there to see what's there. So for this reason, if we do this sort of question answering based on data that we don't know anything about, then I think we are in trouble. And for this reason, I think that kind of following the process that we have right now, so trying to find all the relevant documents, then do selection according to well-documented criteria, and then do the data extraction. So generally doing the systematic review process. This is still here to stay.
Okay, thank you. We are almost at the end, but I think we can take another question. Is literature search in a systematic manner possible by AI tools?
Yeah, so here this really depends on a little bit on what you mean by search, but we are also trying to help with validation of search strategies and finding similar documents using AI. So I can say that, it's from our team, at least, only a beginning. There are other teams that are more advanced here, but there are some, let's say, approaches to use AI.
So maybe one more question. What are your thoughts on peer reviewing when using the AI for systematic reviews? Is another AI going to replace peer reviewing?
Yeah, so I find it really interesting that the whole field of, let's say, AI or machine learning has a massive problem with peer review. And here in this field, it's not really about papers. Peer review happens at conferences. And just to give you one example, what we are now calling prompts, and what is really instrumental in making all of this happen, it was introduced first by paper on control strings from Richard Zucker and colleagues. and it was rejected in peer review. So it's of course, many stories like this are there in every field, but generally people recognize that, especially even in machine learning, the peer review problem is there, and they are trying to also apply machine learning models to tackle this. I mean, kind of putting this to use in their own field. I don't know about any successes so far, but this is something that, this is an active area of research.
Okay, thank you so much. This was really interesting. We have a lot of questions still to be answered, but we will, as we mentioned before, we will write an article which will address all the questions we are able to answer, of course, and send it to you with all the important links and information. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance, for so many questions, and for all the compliments. And in the chat, you can see more links. Follow us on social media. And if you would like to get in touch with us, this is our email address, info@laser.ai. And thank you to all the speakers.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.